Hello and welcome to this session. In this session we are going to talk about the topic computing solutions. This topic has been further broken down into three different sections or three different topics, which are information technology, information processing and information systems. Now we are going to discuss information technology first. As students of BIT, that's Bachelor of Information Technology, you should really be very comfortable and you should know exactly what information technology is. So what exactly is information technology? The dictionary, the Oxford English Dictionary, defines technology as the practice of an applied science. So going by that definition, information technology is a science. It is a science of collecting, storing, processing and transmitting of information. Now many people feel that or they equate computers with information technology. They feel that information technology really care about only when computers came into being. But that is not really true. In fact, thousands of years back, when the Chinese were using the abacus for doing mathematical calculations, they were using information technology. They were doing digital calculations and manipulation of numbers. Okay. The next thing we're going to look at is, after looking at what information technology is all about, we're going to stand back a little and take a small history lesson. Let us look at the major developments which have taken place in information technology ever since the recording of time. Now, the first major development which took place about 5,000 to 6,000 years back was the development of the written language. Before the written language came about, man communicated with each other only through verbal dialogue, mostly grunts and groans. It was with the written language, it was a very major development and a major milestone, because with the written language, man was able to record what he was speaking. He was able to put it down, store it, retrieve it later, and then pass it on, which is why written language was a very, very major development in information technology. The next development, which took place about 1,000 years back, was the development of digital arithmetic. Now that again was a very major development, because digital arithmetic brought about the manipulation of data, the manipulation of numbers. You could add, subtract, divide, multiply and get some different results. So you could start with one number, do some manipulation in it, do some digital arithmetic on it and get another number. So this was another very major development. The third development, which took place just about 500 years back, was the development of printing. Printing was again a very important development, mainly because it widened the horizons of the written word. Earlier, the written word was there, but we were able to distribute, or we were able to pass it around only to a few people, and it was a very laborious process. For example, if somebody wanted to duplicate some information, he probably had to write it all down by hand. Now that was, of course, a very boring, tedious, cumbersome process. Not only that, it involved the person getting bored, and so there would have been errors creeping in. So it is an error-prone process. With printing, that was eliminated. It is now easy to create information, to distribute it, to copy it, to duplicate it, and it was possible to distribute information across a vast space and across a large number of people in a very short time. Which is why printing is a very major development, and it was the last development which one can consider in information technology. Now I can see most people are wondering why I have ignored computers. Many people might think that computers is the single biggest development which has taken place in information technology. While a computer is a very, very important tool, it is nevertheless a tool. It is a very powerful tool, it is a very fast tool, it is very accurate, it helps us to do a lot of things faster, but it is just an accessory, or it is just an aid. The real development is digital arithmetic in connection with computers. Computers help us to do digital arithmetic better, so it is just a tool. This of course does not mean that we are undermining the importance of computers. Computers have been a very, very useful and a very important development, and because of them, because of the other related electronic developments, this century has also been called the time of the second industrial revolution. But again, I reiterate the point that the three major developments have been written language, digital arithmetic and printing. The next thing we're going to look at is information. Now when we talk about information, we really open up a Pandora's box, because the definition of information is a matter of heavy debate. The reasons are quite clear. It is mainly because information is something intangible. You can't quantify it. You can't say I want 1 unit or 2 units or 3 units of information. It's a concept, so it's difficult to define. Secondly, different people have different interpretations about the same piece of information. Now, I could understand something from a piece of information and someone else could understand something totally different. So different people have different interpretations. Which is why the topic of information, or the definition of information, is a topic of major semantic debate among linguists, among computer professionals, among psychologists, everybody. What we will do is we will not get into that debate. We will stay away from it, and we will try and see what is our interpretation of information. What do we deduce from information? Before that, let's introduce a couple of more words to make it more interesting. What is data and what is knowledge? How is it different from information, if it is different, and what are the differences, if any? The next thing we look at is data, information, and knowledge. Now, when we communicate with each other, as we said earlier, we use a spoken word, but we use words. We use words. Words are composed of characters. So basically, we use a set of characters while communicating. A set of characters which has got some meaning to it, that is called data. For example, let's take characters like 6899944. Now, that set of characters has some meaning to it. Opposed to that, let's take a set of characters like, say, A, exclamation mark, ampersand, and hash. This set of characters has no meaning. It is just a combination of characters, that is all. So 6899944 is character set with a meaning, and that is called data. What is information then? As the word signifies, information infers more meaning. Any data set, that means a data set is a set of characters with some meaning, then that has some added value, and when that is used for decision making by a decision maker, then that is called information. Taking the same example forward, let's take, we have taken the number 6899944. Suppose we prefix it by telephone number. Then the entire string, which becomes telephone number 6899944, becomes a value added piece of data, and therefore is information. So we derive information from data. The next thing is knowledge. Now, what is knowledge? Knowledge is what we gain from our experience, from our understanding, from what we have acted upon in the past, from what we have seen in the past. A sum total of all that, what we have gained from that, is our knowledge and experience. This is a very human trait, and mostly only humans have it. Machines or animals don't improve with experience, they don't learn things from experience. So knowledge is basically experience. It is information with some value added to it, which is used for decision making, and which can be used as a reference for the future. For example, keeping the same example in mind, telephone number 6899944 indicates that this is a telephone number. From our past experience or from our knowledge, we also know that the first 3 digits of this number denote the area code, and therefore we know which area this telephone number belongs to and where the person stays to whom this telephone number belongs. Let's see if we can explain this difference, the nuances or differences between data, information, and knowledge in another way. Let's look at this slide. What is data? The statement, it is raining, that is data. What is information? The statement that it is raining and my car windows are open, that is information. It has got some value added to it, so therefore it is information. What is knowledge? Knowledge is that it is normally rain in the monsoons. I should close my car windows when I keep my car outside. That is knowledge, because that is something which we have gained from our past experience and something which we are using as a reference to the future. This is the difference between data, information, and knowledge. So what we have done is we have really sidestepped the question of defining information. We have seen through examples what we mean by information. Now, what we know is that we have seen that information is obviously required by any system for anything. But what about the type of information? Is high quality information required, or is low quality information, will it do? No, information has to have a certain quality. It has to meet certain standards. Only then is it of some use to the system. So what are the attributes, or what are the characteristics based on which we can measure information, or we can say that yes, this is good information, this is bad information? There are 4 such characteristics. Let's look at each one. The first one is completeness. Information has to be complete. This is something which is quite obvious. Any incomplete information is not going to be of much use to anybody. For example, if you have a purchase order which does not contain the name of the vendor, then that purchase order is of no use. You don't know where to send it. So completeness of information is an absolute must. However, in some cases, the information may appear to be incomplete, but the remaining portion is understood. For example, let's take the statement, it is raining. Technically, it is incomplete because one doesn't know where it is raining and when it is raining. But So the really technically complete statement should be, it is raining at 11 a.m. today on the 25th of December 1999 at 221B Baker Street. That is a complete information. However, when you say it is raining, the rest of the information is understood. It implies automatically that the person who is making that statement knew that it is raining where he is standing and when he is making the statement. So in some cases, completeness of an information is understood, but in most cases it has to be explicitly mentioned. The next attribute we are looking at, the next quality, next characteristic of the information we are looking at is accuracy. Again, this is something which is quite obvious. Information has to be accurate. Inaccurate or wrong information is not going to help anybody. If you have a report which contains incorrect page totals or incorrect column totals, then it is obviously going to cause a problem, or worse, it is going to be an input for wrong decision making, which are going to cause bigger problems later on. So accuracy of the information is absolutely required. The third characteristic we are going to look at is timeliness. Now this characteristic is something which is not very easily understood and therefore not given its due importance. However, it is a very, very important characteristic. Timeliness is that the information should reach the person on time, when he needs it. Let's take an example. Suppose you have a chain of hotels and they have the facility of offering the guest that he can make a reservation in any of the hotels from any other place or any other hotel in the chain. So he just makes a reservation in a hotel at some place. Now that information does not reach the hotel on time. So when the guest goes there and says, look, I have a booking, I've come here to stay, the hotel will say, I'm sorry, we don't have a reservation and so we cannot give you a room. It's a problem. The problem is not because of lack of completeness or lack of accuracy. The information probably when it did reach the hotel, maybe a couple of hours later, the next day, was complete, was accurate, but it was not timely. The last characteristic we're going to look at is adequacy or usefulness. The information may be complete, it may be accurate, it may be absolutely on time, but if it is not in a format which is useful to the user, if it is not in a way which whose benefit can be taken by the user, then it's of no use. Again, let me give you an example. Suppose there is a stores clerk. Every Monday in the morning, he is supposed to order items whose stock levels are falling below the reorder level. Every Monday morning, on the dot, he gets a report from the system which prints out a list of all the items which are there in the store, maybe 300 to 400 items, prints out the items, prints out their current stock position, and also prints out the reorder levels. Now every Monday morning the stores clerk has to go through this report, which may be a number of pages long, and he has to manually see which of those items have to be reordered. This is not a format which is useful to him. He is spending a lot of time on just doing this work. A better format or more adequate or useful information would have been an exception report, where the system would have automatically printed out only those items whose stock levels have fallen below the reorder level. So on Monday morning, when the stores clerk gets this report, maybe a couple of pages long, he knows all he has to do is order all the items on that report, period. No other manual intervention. That is a useful report and that is a useful piece of information. So this is about information, the quality of information. Now we will look at a very, very important concept again, which is very neglected, and therefore we are going to spend some time on it to try and see whether we can bring about some awareness of it. Let's play a small game. When you think of security, what do you think of? You think of guard dogs, you think of fire alarms, burglar alarms, you think of policemen, you think of padlocks, closed circuit cameras, all that. Yes, that's natural, because when one thinks of security, one thinks of all this. Because mainly so far, one is only thinking about physical security or the security of physical tangible goods. It is easy to secure a car by locking it. It is easy to secure a factory by locking the doors outside. But what is the use of locking the factory door, or of having guard dogs patrolling the grounds of a laboratory, or having closed circuit cameras in the hotel lobby, when anybody and everybody can enter the computer room? Or even if everybody cannot enter the computer room, they can access the computer from the terminals which have been placed all over the organization. Why is it relatively easy to breach computer security as compared to other types of security? Why is it more difficult to steal a few thousand of rupees from the bank locker than it is to steal hundreds and thousands of rupees electronically from a computer? Why is that so? What are the reasons? Let's look at the reasons. The reasons for computer crime or the lapses in computer security or a breach in computer security, first reason is it is very difficult to prove. Now when an item is stolen, when a particular object is stolen, it's missing. You know it was there earlier and now it is not there, so it is stolen. So in the case of information, that is not true. The piece of information may still be there, the report, the file, whatever, it may still be there, the floppy may still have that information, but the thief has come, he has maybe copied the information or has even read it and gone away. The information is stolen, but it is very difficult to prove. Second, there is not much historical data about it. We have historical data, we have past experiences about bank robberies, about robberies in homes. We know what people do in those cases. We know what are the remedial actions to be taken in case the bank robbers have already done robbery somewhere else. We know probably the modus operandi is the same. So we have a lot of historical information, historical data with us to do risk analysis. In the case of computer crime, since people are just becoming aware of it, and not even that much, we don't have that much historical data. So you can't do any risk analysis. You can't say, okay, this is what is going to happen, that is what is going to happen. So there's lack of historical data. The third reason for lapses in computer security is distributed data processing. Now how is that going to be a reason? Let's go back a little. Do you know that the first electronic computer was built in 1946 in the USA, and it weighed about 30 tons. It used up the space, or filled up the space of a 2-car garage, and it used up about 18,000 vacuum tubes. It was a huge affair, and as such it was as impregnable as a fortress. Nobody could touch it. It was totally secure. All the processing was done centrally on that one machine. As technology advanced, as manufacturing techniques advanced, as engineering skills advanced, computers became smaller, they became faster, they became more sophisticated, and they became more friendly. Now you had a computer on each and every user's desk. These computers were linked together and were also linked to a larger central computer. The processing of data or of information was done at each individual workstations, and also part of it was done at the central place. So data processing was distributed. It was distributed between the work nodes as well as the center. Now it has its own advantages, of course, but what happened because of that is that computers became more friendly, people became more used to computers, they were able to access them freely, and as more people were able to access the computers, computer crime also increased. Another reason why you have breaches in computer security or computer crime goes undetected is that a computer criminal, in case he is suspected or if he is questioned that why are you doing this or what does this mean, he can get away by saying that it's the computer's fault. People are always suspicious about computers. They still regard computers as something alien, and they are ready to find fault with it. I'm sure all of you know of people who blame their large telephone bills on the computers. I know of one person who blamed the incorrect address on his telephone bill on the computer. Why is that so? It's because it's a common human trait. Blame something you don't understand. And so far, till now at least, computer is still alien. So a computer criminal can get away by saying it's the computer's fault. The last and the most important reason why you have problems with computer security is that the computer professionals themselves do not take it seriously. Computer security as a topic is not taught anywhere. Nobody takes it seriously. Nobody is aware of much about it. Let me ask you a question. How many of you who are working have played computer games in the office? I'm sure all of you. But that's a crime, isn't it? Because you are stealing the work time in the office. But nobody is aware of it. People do it all the time. So until computer professionals take this topic seriously, computer crime is just going to proliferate. Now, this does not mean that you cannot prevent it. You can prevent computer crime. If not prevent, at least you can definitely reduce it. So what are the measures? How do you prevent it? One very common method is secret passwords. When you have a secret password, what that means is each user is given a code which only he is supposed to know, and this is what he is going to use to access the system. However, in practice, this is a very good initial idea, but it is not foolproof. Reason being that secret passwords never remain secret. People say, well, it's something which I can definitely share with my friend, with my neighbor, with my family, with my wife, with my children, and once it is shared with somebody, the secrecy is gone, and therefore the access is left open to everybody. That is what we mean by saying computer professionals are not serious about it. If they were serious about it, they would probably say that yes, this is something secret, this is something which is only mine, and I will not divulge it to anybody. But that does not happen. The next method, which is at a slightly higher level than secret passwords, is the encryption method. In that, what you do is, you have the information, using a key, that information is coded, it is then transferred or transmitted to the receiver's end. He also has the key and he decodes the message, which is a slightly better method of preventing computer crime than secret passwords. But again, it is not foolproof, because when you have a key, you have a code to break it, and you have with practice, one can break almost all keys. In fact, in the Second World War, there were people whose only job was to prepare codes for transmitting messages and to try and decipher or break the enemy's codes. But it is a better method than secret passwords. Finally, the most important and the best possible way of ensuring computer security is that, as we mentioned before, the professionals themselves should ensure security. They must not leave their codes lying outside. They must switch off their computer terminals or make sure that they have logged out properly before leaving the station. All these things have to be enforced by the computer professionals themselves. Now let's consider certain security measures which you might want to take for ensuring computer security or data security at the computer managers or EDP managers level. Suppose you are the EDP manager or the computer manager of an organization, and you want to ensure that you are safe, your data is safe against system malfunction as well as any malicious fiddling around. So let's look at the security measures that you can take. The first type of security measure that we are going to look at is to protect you or to cover you against system malfunction. That means if there's a problem with the hardware crashes, the disk crashes, or there's some problem there. For that, the first thing and the most important thing is to always have a backup. Now when you have a backup, what do you mean? You mean a backup is a copy of the data which is there in the system. In the olden days, it is like the Xerox or the photocopy or the carbon copy. You have a backup on any device. It could be a floppy, it could be a cartridge, it could be anything of which you're using in the organization, but a backup has to be there on a device. Not only a single backup. Ideally speaking, you should have 4 types of backup: the odd, even, weekly, and monthly. Now what does that mean? Odd backup is the backup which is taken on the odd days of the month. So the 1st, the 3rd, the 5th, 7th, 9th, etc. On those days, you take a backup on the first device, call it A, that's the odd backup device. On the even days of the month, 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th, 10th, you take a backup on the odd backup, on the even backup device, which is B. Then you have the backup taken every week. You decide on the day, it could be Monday, it could be Sunday, you decide on the time, it could be early in the morning, it could be just before leaving in the evening, whatever. You take the backup every week on that fixed time on the 3rd device, which is the weekly backup device called C. The last backup is the monthly backup. Again, you decide on the time in the day. It could be the 1st, 15th, 30th, whichever day you decide. Time also could be decided. And every month on that specified time and date, you take the backup on the 4th device, which is the monthly backup device B. Now, when you have these 4 devices, this covers you against any system malfunction. If the system crashes, you have the last day's backup, the odd and the even backups. If those fail, you have the weekly backup. Others, you have the monthly backup. So at the most, you're going to lose a month's data, which is why this is a very foolproof and almost 100% ensuring that your data is safe. However, it is not only enough to take the backup, you must also record it properly. It seems a very simple task, and it is something which most people ignore, because they say that if you've taken the backup, it's fine, that's all you need to. But I have seen places, I have seen organizations where they were very meticulous, very careful about taking backups, but they did not record it. So when the time came for them to recover, there was system failure, and they had to recover their data from the backup. They didn't have a clue which device contained what. So unless you know what is going in the device, these devices are of no use. So you must maintain a meticulous backup register. It should contain the name of the device, the date, the time, who is taking the backup. All these details must be entered there. Now these 2 measures we are looking at are merely pointers. Please don't think that these are the only measures you need to take for ensuring security. No, these are only pointers. You have to start your discussion or start your investigation in this direction, and you will probably get more measures which are relevant to your organization. Okay. The next set of security measures we are looking at is to ensure that there is no malicious tampering of data, ensure that the system is not being misused. One way of doing it is by having spot checks on terminals. That means you go around the organization where the terminals are placed, and you go around checking where people are watching what they should not be watching, or what is there on the screens of the terminals. Is it something which the user is supposed to be seeing, or is it something which he has no business looking at? You can investigate. Second thing is the audit trail. The audit trail tells you who did what, on which terminal, and when you do it, and which files did you use, everything. It contains the entire history of the transaction, history of what was done on that terminal. One can look at the entire history to find out what was happening on that terminal, or one can look at some exceptional reports. Suppose there is some exceptional activity on a terminal at a particular time, then the terminal should not have been so active. You can investigate and find out what was happening. The third thing which you can do is to grant access levels. Now, granting of access level is very important, and you have three different types of access levels. The lowermost, or the lowest access level, is the one in which you can only query. You can only see the information. The person can only ask that I want to see this. He can't do anything else to it. The second access level is where he can see and update. If he can go there and he can change a few information here and there. The third and the highest access level which you have is you can see what is there on the screen, you can update some information, and you can insert new information or delete old information. That is the highest access level. Now, the granting of these access levels has to be very carefully done, has to be reviewed. In case a person decides to leave the company or leave the department or is promoted or is demoted or whatever, his access levels must be checked immediately. Also, in many organizations, especially abroad, the granting of the highest access level is first preceded by a credit check on the financial status of the company. So it depends of the individual concerned. So it depends on how important you want the access levels to be. Now, so far we've talked about information technology. The next thing we're going to look at is information processing. Okay. How do you process the actual information? What are the different sources of information? What are the different management levels who are going to use that information? The first thing is the sources of information, the traditional sources of information. Well, normally the ones which we normally think of, those sources of information, the first is the existing documentation of an organization. You have the completed forms, you have files, you have records, you've got minutes of the meetings, you've got user manuals, you've got system manuals, you've got all sorts of data registers, you've got letters, you've got all maybe proposals, you've got other documents which can tell you a lot of information about the existing system. And you've said earlier that existing system study is extremely important. You cannot build on something new unless you know what is happening right now. So this existing documentation is a very, very important source of information. The next source of information is the research or site visits. This is something which is not very commonly used. It's used only in some cases. Maybe if another organization is having the same kind of problem that you are having and you want to find out how they solve it, you want to get that information, you maybe go into a site visit, find out from them. Or you want to find out whether any organization elsewhere has had the same problem, you may go to the library and do some reference work, get some research work done. So it's not a very commonly used source of information. The third is the observation of the work environment. Here again is not very commonly used, mainly because it's people feel that if you observe somebody doing something, you don't get the true picture. People are conscious, people put on their best behavior, they don't do things normally. However, it has its own advantages. There will be some very complex procedure which the user is not able to explain to you, okay, which you might find difficult to speak it out or tell you verbally. If you actually watch him doing it or observe him doing it, it might help you to understand the procedure and get that information. So it has its advantages. The next source is questionnaires. Now, questionnaires are a source which are most commonly used. I'm sure most of you have answered or at least replied to a questionnaire at some stage. If they're properly used, then a questionnaire is probably the best possible method of getting information in the fastest possible time from the largest number of people. But the key word here is if it is properly used. The writing of a questionnaire is a very, very difficult task, and many people say it's a work of art. A good questionnaire, they say, is a work of art. Okay. The last source of information, and the one which we normally think of when we say information or how do we get information, is interviews. Personal interviews, a one-to-one talking between two different people. That is what we mean by interviews. Now, while it is clear the advantages are immense, you could definitely see the body language of the person concerned. You can clarify certain doubts which they might have, across the table. But it is also one of the most expensive and the most time-consuming of all sources. So these are traditional sources of information that we're looking at. It's up to you to choose which are the ones which you want to use. Apart from that, apart from the traditional sources of information, there are some unconventional sources. Now, each industry has its own specific sources of information. So we're just looking at a few of them here. This is not a very comprehensive list, this is the start. First thing we're looking at is a timesheet. Now, a timesheet is a very, very useful source of information for finding out the number of days worked by an employee. You don't you find out how many hours he worked for his overtime processing or for his payroll accounting. You can do all that from the timesheet. Now, a timesheet may be manual in many organizations, it may be computerized in many organizations, or mechanized. In a manual timesheet is most probably the register, where the employee has to sign when he comes in. In a computerized or a mechanized timesheet, they probably have cards. You have to swipe the card, and the information about the employee code or his name or whatever, and the time that he has entered the office is logged. So with that, the computer will then process and give you a list of which employee came when, what was the amount of time he worked, etc., etc. This information is useful for, as I said, payroll processing and for calculation of overtime. Another unconventional source of information is your sales figures. Now, sales figures tell you a lot about the organization's targets, about the efficiency or the working of the sales department, about how realistic the targets are there actuals matching the targets or not. All this information is got from sales figures. You can also get information from barcodes. Now, in India, it may not be used all that much. Abroad, it is used very extensively. In India, in some of the libraries, we use barcodes, where they have small strips on the books with, small bars written on them. Those bars are coded. You have a scanner. This scanner scans those bars, and the information about the book, about the author, about the publisher, etc. is retrieved. So you can use that source of information also. These are about the unconventional sources of information. Now we want to talk about the different levels of management. Okay. Now we have seen that management is divided into 3 levels. First level is the senior level, the middle management, and the junior management. How do you differentiate them? It is differentiated mainly by the kind of work they do or the kind of things they are supposed to be doing. For example, senior management is involved with strategic planning. They are interested in their long-term goals. They want to know which direction the company is going. They are interested in whether they have enough resources, for example, material or finance or human resources to meet those long-term goals. They want to see what is their 5-year plan. They want to know where the company will be 5 years from now. So mostly the strategic planning or the planning for long-term purpose is done by the senior management. The middle management takes the long-term goals from the senior management and breaks it up into shorter-term goals. And the achieving of these short-term goals is the job of the middle management. So they are more interested in control procedures. They want to know how to utilize the resources they have to achieve those targets, and whether the targets are being achieved properly or not, whether the people are working properly or not. So they want to have a monitoring control on the targets and on the work being done. The junior management does approximately the same kind of work as the middle management, but at a much lower level. The short-term goals are broken down further into operational goals, maybe day-to-day goals or maximum weekly goals, and it's the job of the junior management to ensure that these short-term goals are met or these daily goals are met, and that the operational day-to-day activities of the company are running smoothly. For that also they need control information. They need to know whether a person is doing his job correctly for the particular day. If his target for the day was so much, has he done that? So that is the job of the junior management. Now we look at the next thing we're looking at are the tools for information processing. Okay. Now the tools which we are going to use for information processing are just that, they are tools. We are not going into a discussion of how to use them, or we're not going to look at what are the best possible tools or going into the nitty-gritty of each tools. We are only going to see the tools, a brief overview of the tools which are necessary for or which are used normally for information processing. The first thing we're looking at is word processing. A word processor. What exactly is a word processor? A word processor is, the definition is, it is a computer installation dedicated to the task of text processing, sometimes with special keyboards and visual displays. Now, does that help you? Is that understandable definition? I'm sure most of you have not understood it, because it not only doesn't explain things, it in fact adds a new phrase called text processing to the definition. So what the next question is going to be, what is text processing? So let's look at that. What is text processing? Now, text processing, it is the conversion of keyboard mechanism of typewriters to generate printed matter and computer compatible text. Now, this again is not a very understandable definition, but it is slightly better than the previous one. It tells us that text processing generates printed matter which is what normal typewriters do. What do normal typewriters do? They take the keystrokes which are entered and they generate it into printed material on paper. Now what the text processing does, it does that also. It takes the keystrokes, it generates them into printed material, and in addition it also generates computer compatible text. That is the advantage of text processing. So coming back to word processor, what exactly is a word processor? A word processor is a machine that is used to manipulate computer compatible text. Now that is a definition which we can probably live with and we can understand. When you have a text which is available with the computer, it is compatible with the computer, you can manipulate it. You can change it around, you can shift it, you can put it here, you can put it there, you can magnify it, you can reduce it, you can underline it, you can do whatever you want. This processing or this manipulation of the computer compatible text, that is the main feature of the word processor. And that is what you can do, which is different in a word processor as compared to a typewriter. So that is what a word processor is. It's a machine which can help you to manipulate computer compatible text. Okay. Now which is a word processor which is most commonly used in the world today? No prize for guessing the answer. It is obviously MS Word. What is MS Word? It is actually Microsoft Word. It is part of a suite of programs called MS Office. Now, MS Office was developed by Microsoft and it contains programs like MS Word, which is the word processor, MS PowerPoint, which is your presentation aid, MS Outlook, which is your event manager. It helps. It's a diary which helps you to manage your activities and helps you manage your meetings, etc. And MS Excel, which is a spreadsheet. We'll be talking about that a bit later. So together these four programs are more than enough to handle almost any activity which can take place in an office, which is why this is a very powerful suite of programs and has probably become acceptable almost all over the world. So when we talk about a word processor, we are going to talk about the features of MS Word here. Again, I want to emphasize that we are not teaching you the word processor right now. We are only talking about briefly about some of the more important features. What are the features of MS Word? The first feature, which is very, very obvious, is it is an extremely powerful and versatile word processing software. It has got so much capability, so much of features available in it, that even a secretary who is using the word processing software MS Word almost continuously for many years will probably have used only a fraction of what it really has to offer. It's like driving a car at the speed of say 60 kilometers per hour, when you know the car can go at 200 kilometers per hour. Okay. So you use only a very, very small portion of what features it really has. There's a whole part of it. It can give you only so much, it can give you a whole lot, depends on what you want. It's a very versatile, a very powerful word processing software. It is a true what you see is what you get software. Now what does that mean? It means what you see on the screen, the format or the way the document is going to look is exactly what you get on paper. So it is very easy for you to make sure that the document is absolutely correct. You can see how it is going to appear finally on paper. So it's easy for you to manipulate it to make it look good. The next thing, it has a spelling and a grammar check. So you don't have to bother about things like whether I'm giving the right grammatical sentences or whether I'm giving the right spelling. You can also specify the country which you want to use as standard, because as you are probably aware that the UK and USA, both these countries have different spellings in some cases. So you can set the standard which you want, and MS Word will check the document for spellings. You can format and edit your text. Now you can make sure that it is perfectly formatted. You can align your paragraphs. You can align all sorts of things. You can edit your text in any way you want. You can cut it. You can paste it. You can view different documents in different windows. So suppose you want to look at 3 different documents. You have windows which you can look, and you can look at each one of them. You can swap between the documents. This is a very useful feature when you want to look at 2 different papers side by side. You can do that even on the computer. You can do text formatting. You can have your bulleted or numbered lists. You can decide on the type of bullets you want. It could be squares, it could be circles, it could be a tick mark, whatever. They have a vast variety of bullets which you can use. You can have numbered lists. You can have 1, 2, 3, 4. You can have ABCD. You can have Roman numerals, whatever. Again, they have a vast list of the numbers that you use. The main advantage of having these numbered lists is that when you have a large list of items to write, you don't have to bother about which number you're going to give. Otherwise normally what happens, you have a list of 50 items and somewhere in the middle you make a mistake. You have to go and correct all those items later on. That is a very major task which is avoided by using numbered lists. Then you have major productivity tools, like say for example you want to copy a text. You have a portion of a text which is available in one document. Maybe you want to copy it in 10 other different documents, or you want to copy the same text in the latter half of the same document. You have productivity tools called copy and paste, which you can copy a particular text in 10 different places. The advantage of that is you don't have to retype all that section all over again. You save on time, and so it's a productivity tool. There's another nice feature in MS Word which is called the automatic completion of words. Now for example, you take the system date, today's date. When you start typing today's date, the word processing software knows that that's what you are doing. It probably gathers from the first couple of characters and automatically completes the date for you. So it saves you typing the rest of the words, rest of the characters. Okay. These are main features of MS Word. Okay. Now there is a word of caution. This is a very, very important thing, so you please listen carefully. You must use only those features of Word that are required or that are needed by you. Okay. It is not necessary that you use 5 different types of fonts or 5 different types of sizes of the characters. You underline this, or you make bulleted lists, and you make numbered lists, and you keep something bold, you put something in italics. All that is not necessary at all. You should only use what is needed. As you mentioned earlier, Word is a very powerful software. It has a lot of features. It is very versatile. Even if you want to, you will not be able to use all the features. So don't try. In any case, when you go to a restaurant, for example, they have a menu which has got some 100 items. You don't order all those 100 items. You pick and choose. You see what you want to eat, or you see what you like, and you only use those. So only use those features of Word which are required by you. If your requirement, a document which you are going to prepare, requires only a straightforward typing of the letter and maybe a few underlines, and that's it. Don't waste your time using formats and various other italics. I'm saying this because some of the assignments that come from DIT students have used a lot of these features which are totally unnecessary. Now the next thing we're going to look at is spreadsheets. Now suppose in an organization you have your bosses tell you that there's a project which is to be completed. The project could be setting up a new factory, or it could be launching of a new product. What they want you to do is to identify the activities which are going to make up that project. They want you to see the sequence of those activities. They want you to assign the time frames, and they also want you to monitor those activities. Now the entire thing is a table. You have a list of the activities, you have the time frames, etc. They also want you to give a presentation on that, and they want you to be able to tell them immediately what is going to happen if any one of the activities gets delayed. So they want you to see, understand, or know about the repercussions of any change in those activity plans. Now you can prepare the document using Word. That's not a problem. But how do you see, or how do you tell them what is going to happen when, say, the activity of the first activity, for example, gets delayed by a day? To find out what is going to happen to the rest of the activities, you have to manually calculate the dates of the remaining activities. It's a very large task. So, what is the solution? The solution is a spreadsheet. So, what is a spreadsheet? A spreadsheet is essentially a table with rows and columns. Okay? The intersection of the row and the column is a cell, and each cell of the table contains data elements. Now, when you have a table, automatically you have column totals, you have row totals, you can do sub-head totals, etc. So, all those totaling or the manipulation of totals is taken care of. Okay? When do you use spreadsheets? The first thing I just said is use spreadsheets when the documents are tabular. Okay. What are the advantages of spreadsheet? The first and the most important advantage is it can keep data current and manage it very well. How does it do that? Okay. Let's say you have data which is there in Word. If you want to keep it current, if you want to change it, you have to go and explicitly change it in the document. Okay. You may use the features of Word like find and replace to replace it in different places, but you have to go there and do it. Now in a spreadsheet, there is a very unique feature which is available in a spreadsheet which tells you that you can insert formulae instead of specific data elements in each cell. That is, instead of a fixed data element, you give a formula with a variable in it. What the spreadsheet does is, it inserts the value taken by the variable at that point in time, and therefore calculates or computes the current value of the data. So the data is always current, and you don't have to do anything about it. In the example which we talked about earlier, the project schedule, suppose instead of mentioning the actual dates of the activities, you mention them as a variable. For example, the first activity is say x, the second activity becomes x plus 2, the third activity becomes say x plus 4. So the minute x changes, or you know that the first activity has been delayed, automatically all the other activities get changed by themselves. That is the main advantage of spreadsheets. So you use spreadsheets mainly for this what if analysis. What if this changes? What is going to happen to the future? Or for example, in your sales processing or your financial processing or anything, suppose you say that with so much of budget or with so much of advertising budget, you are saying that I can get a market share of so much. If I reduce the advertising budget, what will the market share be like? Or if I increase the advertising budget, what will market share be like? So this kind of what if analysis is very useful is very easily done with a spreadsheet. Now the last thing we will look at today is the common word processors and the spreadsheets which are there in the market. Now many of you may not have worked on word processors like WordStar and WordPerfect because they were there much earlier in the very initial stages. They were very lower level or very unsophisticated and very crude as compared to the current MS Word. But they were probably the precursors and the initial pioneers of word processing. So the commonly used word processors which were there are WordStar, then you have WordPerfect, and of course the current favorite is MS Word, which has probably become the global standard. In spreadsheets also, you had a spreadsheet called Lotus 123, which was again used a long time back and was also not a very powerful spreadsheet, but it got by. The current one which probably everybody is using is MS Excel, which is the spreadsheet as part of the suite of MS Office, which we talked about earlier. Now this was what we talked about computing solutions. Now after we finish talking about computing solutions, what I want to mention here, to emphasize here is, if you do a quick look through what we did, we talked about information technology, we talked about information processing, part of information processing, we have talked about the traditional tools of information processing, which are word processors and spreadsheets. In the next session we will talk about databases. But right now, thanks for listening to me, and we'll meet again in the next session.